The zipper stuck halfway up the duffel. It was 90 degrees outside, the motel's window unit was wheezing warm air, and I could already feel the sweat starting to form behind my knees, but I wasn't going to yank it. I gripped the tab, tried it again slow. It gave little victory. I'd had too few of those lately. Out in the parking lot, the Nevada sun bounced off the hood of my car like it was trying to blind me. One more bag to load, one more breath in the desert air I was trying to convince myself felt like freedom, not exile. This was supposed to be my reset, my clean break, the one thing I could do on my own terms. I was 34 and I had run away from home. My name's Drew, born and raised in a suburb outside Indianapolis where all the houses looked like they'd been pressed out of the same suburban mold, two-car garage, beige siding, a narrow patch of lawn no one really played on. I used to think I had a normal family. My dad worked in car sales and acted like he was always closing. My mom was part-time everything, sometimes a florist, sometimes substitute teacher, sometimes just chain-smoking on the porch and talking about how her sister's kids were doing better than us. I was the middle child. Between my brother Dean, 2 years older, captain of everything in high school, still gets Christmas cards from teachers, and my sister Emily, 5 years younger, practically raised by Instagram, and somehow always the golden child in my mom's eyes. Me, I was the quiet one. The he'll-figure-it-out kid, the one who kept the peace, said it's fine even when it was. I moved out at 22 and only made it 6 miles away. I worked at help desk jobs that never paid enough, dated women who never stuck around long enough to meet my family, and spent most weekends pretending I had plans so I didn't get roped into another, just come by for dinner, guilt trap. But things didn't really snap until last fall. It started small. My dad called, asked if I could help him move a loveseat from the garage into the living room, said his back was acting up. I said sure, drove over after work, lifted the thing solo while he supervised. Typical. While I was there, my mom casually mentioned that Dean's wife was pregnant again, third kid. Everyone knew but me. That's weird, I said. I talked to Dean like 2 weeks ago. He probably forgot, she said, like that was reasonable. Then she asked if I could help Emily move into her new apartment that weekend. Didn't she just move 6 months ago? She got a better place, nicer view. The lease was in my name, so we had to be quick about it. Can you bring your truck? I don't have a truck. I've never had a truck. Oh, right, she waved her hand. That's your Uncle Ben. Anyway, you'll help, right? I left without dessert. That was the start. Over the next few months, I noticed it more and more, how they only called when they needed something. How I was always the backup plan. Dean never helped anyone move. Emily didn't even carry her own groceries. But I was the mule. The free IT guy, the errand boy, the designated you're not doing anything anyway sibling. I tried to set boundaries, said no to a few things, stopped replying right away. And that's when things got nasty. One night in February, I was driving home from work when I got a text from Mom. Emergency, call me. My stomach dropped. I pulled over in the snow, called her. Turned out Emily had locked herself out of her car at a club downtown at midnight. I'm at least 40 minutes away, I said. Can't she call a locksmith? She said she didn't feel safe, and I told her you'd come. Just like that. Not can you help? Not would you mind? She'd already promised me. I said no for the first time clearly. There was a long pause. Then, you used to be so dependable. A week later, Dean called, said he'd heard I was going through something. Not really, I said, just finally growing a spine, I guess. He didn't laugh, just told me I shouldn't turn my back on family. That phrase did it. It kept repeating in my head all weekend. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think. I sat on my apartment floor Sunday morning, staring at the same 3 plants I hadn't watered in weeks, and asked myself, if I moved away, really away, would anyone even notice? Would they care? Or would they just find someone else to fix their Wi-Fi and carry their damn couches? By Tuesday, I'd put in notice at work. By Friday, I signed a lease on a tiny studio in Henderson, Nevada. And 2 weeks later, I was pulling into a motel parking lot with the last of my boxes in the backseat and a burner phone in my glove compartment. I didn't give them my new address. I didn't update my socials. I blocked their numbers, every one of them. I told myself it wasn't forever. I just needed space. Time to remember who I was without them in my ear. The first week felt like breathing after being underwater too long. No one called, no one knocked. I got groceries on my schedule. I sat in silence and actually liked it. I got a job at a call center, low stakes, nobody asked questions. I told people I was from Ohio. I bought blackout curtains. I walked the strip sometimes just to disappear in the noise. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Until the mail came. It was a yellow envelope, forward stamped 4 times. Old handwriting, my dad's. Inside, one piece of lined paper with 6 words in all caps. You don't do this to family. No return address, just a date circled, next Friday. In a time, 7 o'clock. No explanation. No signature. I checked my block numbers, all still blocked. I told myself it was probably just a guilt tactic, a Hail Mary to yank me back, something vague and ominous to reel me in. But then I saw the hotel logo printed faintly on the back of the paper, a place down on Fremont Street. I hadn't told anyone where I lived. Friday came. I didn't go. I couldn't. But I did drive past the hotel. Just to see. Outside at the curb was a van. My mom was leaning against it, smoking. Dean stood near the entrance, checking his watch. Emily had a suitcase open on the sidewalk, rearranging shoes. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. I moved across the country to escape my family. They followed me here. The van was unmistakable. A Navy Dodge Caravan with a dent in the rear passenger door and a bumper sticker from Dean's college that read, "We bleed blue." I stayed across the street in my car, parked behind a taco truck. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly they ached. My brain kept offering bad explanations. Maybe they were on a vacation, maybe they were passing through, maybe it was all a coincidence. But deep down I knew they hadn't just followed me. They had found me. I waited until they went inside, then I drove back to my place, heart pounding like I'd just outrun something with claws. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside felt like it might be them. I tried not to panic. It wasn't illegal for them to be here. It wasn't illegal to book a hotel in the same city. But the fact that they had, without telling me, without asking, without anything except that cryptic letter, that was the part I couldn't shake. It felt like a message. Like a move. The next morning, there was a knock on my door. I didn't answer. I stayed dead still on the couch, phone in hand, watching the shadow under the door. After a few seconds, I heard a familiar voice through the wood. "Drew, it's Mom, we just wanted to talk." Not we. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I waited for them to leave. They didn't. They waited 30 minutes. Then slid something under the door, a photo of the 3 of us as kids. Me in the middle, 6 years old, holding a plastic sword, Dean on one side, Emily on the other. Halloween, we were pirates. On the back in shaky pen. "Come home, we can still fix this." I snapped. Not loudly, not violently, quietly, like a wire coming loose. I picked up the photo, ripped it clean down the middle, and flushed it. Then I called the property manager and asked if I could break my lease. He said no, not without penalty. I didn't care. I needed out. But I had no backup plan. I had no friends in town yet, no place to crash, and just enough savings to maybe survive a few weeks without work. Still, I started packing. That evening, I left through the back stairwell and drove to a diner on the edge of town. I brought my laptop, sat in the corner booth, and started looking for places out of state. Maybe Arizona, maybe Oregon, maybe back east, somewhere rural. I was halfway through filling out an application for a studio in Flagstaff when someone slid into the seat across from me. I looked up, already knowing who it was. "Dean." "Don't make a scene," he said, calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed it. "How did you find me?" I asked, voice low. He didn't answer right away, just set a hotel keycard on the table between us. "You don't get to disappear," he said. "That's not how this works." He tried to guilt me. Said Mom wasn't sleeping, that Emily had cried when she saw how empty my old apartment was, that Dad wasn't doing great, blood pressure, or maybe just guilt, Dean said, like that was my problem to solve. "You could have talked to us," he said. "Instead you vanished like we were the villains." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the word villains was so absurd coming from him. "You only call when you want something," I said. "You only show up when you're trying to fix your mess." "We came to fix this," he said, motioning around like our strained silence was the real enemy. I closed my laptop and stood up. "You made it worse." That night I slept in my car, just in case. I parked in a grocery store lot under a camera and left the engine off, windows cracked. Sometime around 4 in the morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a feeling I couldn't place, not quite fear, not quite rage, just something electric and cold. I checked my phone, 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, no voicemails. I blocked the numbers anyway. Then I drove 2 towns over, sat in a gas station lot, and cried for the first time in years. The next morning, I called my boss and quit. I couldn't concentrate on anything anyway. She asked if I was okay. I lied. Then I called the leasing office again and told them I'd pay the fee to break the lease early. I scheduled my move-out date for 10 days later. I thought maybe that would give me time to disappear again. I was wrong. On day 3, I came back from running an errand, just toothpaste and chips, nothing major, and found my apartment door open. It wasn't kicked in, no sign of forced entry. But inside, everything had been moved. Boxes unstacked, photos unwrapped, clothes folded into piles I didn't make. And in the middle of the bed, a note written in Emily's loopy cursive. "We just want to be a family again, please stop shutting us out." I didn't even finish reading it. I packed what I could into my car, left the rest, and drove until my eyes hurt. I slept in a truck stop that night, with my hoodie pulled over my head and a tire iron under the seat. It wasn't just control anymore. It was surveillance. It was entitlement. It was a total disregard for what I needed. I changed my phone number, again. I used cash for everything, deleted my email accounts, shut down all my social media. I became a ghost in my own skin. But ghosts get tired too. By the end of the week, I was back at a different motel, 5 miles from where I started. I thought maybe they'd give up. Maybe they'd run out of steam. Instead, the next morning there was a knock. And this time it was Emily. She was crying before I even opened the door. Hair disheveled, makeup streaked, clutching some kind of binder. "I don't want to fight," she said, just talk, okay?" I let her in. Not because I wanted to. Because I was tired and a little scared of what she'd do if I didn't. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened the binder. Inside, printed emails, old text screenshots, photos, some of my own journals scanned. I felt sick. She looked up at me with this desperate kind of softness. "We've been trying to understand why you left, we just want to fix it." "You broke into my life," I said. Her face crumpled. "You left us," she whispered, "that broke me." I kicked her out. I didn't yell, didn't touch her, just opened the door and pointed. She left without another word. But she left the binder. I burned it that night in a trash can behind the motel. The flame felt too small. I moved across the country to escape my family. They followed me here. It was 2 in the morning and I was sitting in a diner booth, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching the blackened edges of the sky start to dissolve into gray. I hadn't spoken to anyone all day. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours in 3 days. I couldn't decide which hurt more, the fear or the betrayal. I kept checking the window like someone was going to crawl out of the night. I wasn't just running anymore. I was unraveling. After I burned the binder, I started thinking about the notebooks it had come from. My journals, I hadn't taken them when I left my old apartment. I couldn't remember why. Maybe I thought I didn't need them. Maybe I thought I was done with that version of myself. But clearly someone had gone back. Which meant someone still had keys, or had figured out the landlord, or found a way in that I didn't even know about. I didn't want to find out which. I spent the next 2 days driving around the outskirts of town looking for short-term rentals, cash only, no credit checks. I found a converted garage behind an old guy's house that smelled like old carpet and peanut shells, but he handed me the key without asking a single question. That night, I dragged my few belongings inside and locked every bolt I could find. Then I stuffed towels under the door and blocked the window with a box fan and 2 blankets. I sat in the middle of the floor for hours just listening. Not for danger. For silence. And I didn't get it. Because my phone buzzed. It was a new number again, one I hadn't blocked yet. The message said, "You can't keep punishing us, we came all this way." No name. But I knew it was Dean. The tone was too self-righteous to be anyone else. That's when it really hit me. They thought they were the victims, that I was the problem, that I had turned my back on them and not the other way around. I sat there holding that phone like it might turn into a weapon or a lifeline, and for a second I wondered if I should just send them a voice memo. Something raw, something final, something that said, "I don't owe you my life just because we share blood." But I didn't, because I knew they'd twist it. They always did. Instead, I drove across town and bought a burner flip phone at a 24-hour electronics store. I set it up with a number only I knew, and I turned my regular phone off for good. No calls, no apps, no GPS, no leaks. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The next morning, I sat on the back steps of the garage and drank gas station coffee in the sun. It was the first moment of peace I'd had since they showed up. I told myself this was the real start, that everything before had just been noise I needed to survive. And for a few days, that held true. I got a part-time job at a local bookstore that didn't care about my background or my silence. I started walking the neighborhood in the evenings. I stopped checking shadows, stopped checking my rear view. It almost felt like healing. Until I saw the flyer. It was taped to a utility pole on my walk home. White paper, blue ink, slightly faded from the sun. At the top, in bold, "Missing our brother, reward offered." Underneath, a photo of me from Facebook, a couple years old. I was smiling, it looked fake even then. The text said, "Drew M., age 34, moved out of state, may be in distress. Please help us reconnect. Family urgently seeking contact." It listed a number. Dean's. And it was posted 2 blocks from where I lived. I stood there for a long time. Not reading. Just breathing. Just watching the paper flutter. It wasn't even about finding me. It was about controlling the narrative. Making strangers think I was the one who disappeared, that I was unstable, that I needed rescuing. They were trying to make me small enough to pity, so I wouldn't be big enough to blame them. That night, I drove around tearing every flyer I could find off every post I passed. There were 13. One even stapled to the corkboard inside the bookstore's bathroom. I quit the next day. I couldn't risk it. They were getting closer. Not just physically, psychologically. Then came the postcard. No envelope. Just a glossy photo of the Grand Canyon and the words, "Thought you might like the view, love, Mom." No return address, just my street name scrawled where an actual mailing address should be. It hadn't come through USPS. Someone slid it into my mailbox. They were here. Again. I packed what I had and checked into a roadside motel under a fake name. I paid for 2 nights in cash and stayed inside the whole time with the curtains drawn and the TV muted. I didn't sleep. I just kept thinking, how far would they go? I imagined them breaking into the garage while I was at work, posing as friends, calling my job and pretending I stolen something, contacting the landlord to say I was mentally unwell. They'd already made flyers. The next step wasn't a confrontation. It was sabotage. So I called a lawyer. Not one I could afford, just a free consultation. I explained the situation, kept it vague. He asked, "Are they threatening you?" "No," I said, "not with words, just presence. They won't leave me alone." He sighed. "Unfortunately, being family doesn't make this illegal, not unless they're trespassing or making threats. You could try a restraining order, but that usually requires proof of danger." "What if I just leave?" I asked. "That's your right," he said, "but unless you sever every possible trail, they'll find you again." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just hiding from people. I was hiding from a system they thought entitled them to me. The obligation of blood, the weight of family, the myth that just because someone raised you, they own you. So I made a new plan. No more renting. No more short leases. No more visible jobs. I'd go where they couldn't trace me, not because I hated them. Because I loved myself more than I feared their judgment. I left Nevada 2 days later, before sunrise. Didn't leave a note. Didn't tell a soul. I crossed 3 state lines in 18 hours and stopped only for gas and to cry in the bathroom stall of a Wendy off I-40. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew where I was. Anywhere near them. I moved across the country to escape my family. They followed me here. It was almost midnight when I crossed into Oklahoma. I didn't plan to stop there, but my back was screaming from the road, my eyes were burning, and my hands were clenched so tight around the wheel I could feel the pulse in my fingers. I pulled into a truck stop and parked between two semis, their engines humming like distant storms. I sat there, engine off, radio off, phone off, just breathing like I'd finally surfaced after drowning for too long. I wasn't free yet, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't being hunted. I stayed in a motel off Route 66 that didn't ask for ID, $40 a night, cash only, no key cards, just a metal key on a plastic tag with the number 8 printed in faded gold. Room smelled like mildew and pine sol, one towel, one working lamp, bed felt like a box spring covered in a pancake. But it was quiet, and no one knew I was there. That was enough. The next morning, I went to a diner nearby. No Wi-Fi, no music, just the low hum of old men talking about crops and carburetors. I ordered eggs and toast and didn't look at my phone once. The waitress called me hun and gave me a free refill without asking. And for 10 full minutes, I was Drew the middle child, or Drew the missing brother, or Drew the one who left. I was just a guy eating breakfast. It felt like a miracle. I spent the next few days doing odd jobs, cash gigs, yard work, painting fences, cleaning out garages. There's something almost sacred about manual labor when you're running from yourself. You don't have time to spiral when you're knee-deep in leaves or scrubbing mold off someone else's walls. I rented a storage unit for the few things I hadn't ditched along the way. Got a new prepaid phone with a number I memorized but didn't save in any account. I stopped checking the rearview mirror after a week. And then I got cocky. I walked into a public library, used the computer to check an old email, one I hadn't touched in months, the one tied to everything, bank accounts, tax info, utilities from Indiana. I just wanted to see if anything was still open, any loose ends I needed to tie up. Inbox had 73 unread messages. Most were junk, but one was from my mom. Subject line: "Come home, we forgive you." Sent 2 days ago. I stared at it for a full minute, then checked the IP metadata. She sent it from a library in Tulsa. 2 towns over. My mouth went dry. I closed the tab, wiped the keyboard, and walked straight out. I didn't even make it to the parking lot before the panic set in. They were close again. Somehow again. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove straight to the storage unit, grabbed what I could fit in my trunk, and hit the highway heading west. No destination, just distance. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they'd get bored, get tired, give up. But deep down I knew. This wasn't about reunion. It was about dominance. 3 days later I was in New Mexico, desert air, red dirt, endless sky. I found a small town that looked like a movie set. A gas station, a post office, 2 bars, and 1 grocery store with sun-faded cereal boxes and a freezer that hummed louder than it should. I asked around, found a room for rent above a bait shop. No lease, just cash and a handshake. The guy who owned it was named Carl, 60-something, smelled like smoke and WD-40, didn't ask questions, didn't seem to care about much beyond fishing and keeping the pipes from freezing. I paid for a month in advance. Told myself I'd figure the rest out later. That night I slept for 12 hours straight. No nightmares, no phone calls, no knocks on the door. Just darkness and the sound of wind. I started working at a hardware store down the road. Quiet place, locals who nodded but didn't pry, no internet, no security cameras, paid in cash on Fridays. I bought a used mountain bike from Carl for $30 and started biking the back roads after sunset. I felt invisible. And for a while I liked it. Until a familiar car showed up outside the shop. It was a black Nissan Rogue with an Indiana plate and a cracked taillight on the left side, the one Dean had driven since college. I remembered riding shotgun in it the day he picked me up from the ER after I sliced my hand open trying to fix the garbage disposal. He hadn't even asked if I was okay, just handed me a Gatorade and said, "You're lucky it wasn't worse." That car sat in the gravel lot for almost 20 minutes. No one got out. Then it left. I told Carl everything that night. Not the whole story, just the gist. That I had family I was trying to stay away from, that they kept finding me, that I didn't feel safe anymore. He didn't blink. Need me to call anyone? He asked. No, I said, just don't tell them where I am. Don't even know your last name, he shrugged. He never brought it up again. But I started preparing to leave anyway. I boxed up what little I had and put it near the door. I didn't know where I'd go next, maybe Utah, maybe Montana, maybe some cabin up north with no signal and no roads. But I was tired of running blind. So I made a plan. I called an old friend from high school, someone I hadn't spoken to in years but who had always been kind, always steady. His name was Caleb. He lived in Northern California now, ran a motorcycle repair shop out of his garage, married, 2 kids. I called from a payphone. Drew, he said, holy crap man, you okay? No, I said, but I'm trying to be. He didn't ask for details, just gave me an address and told me I could crash in his spare room for a while. I felt the tears coming before I even hung up. Not because I was scared. Because someone was finally saying yes without demanding anything back. I told Carl I'd be gone by the weekend. He nodded once, handed me back half the rent I'd paid. Just get where you're going, he said. I drove west again, long stretches of desert gas stations with busted pumps, sky so wide it made me dizzy. And for a while it felt okay. Until the second-to-last gas stop before the California line. I stepped out of the bathroom and someone was waiting by my car. Emily. She didn't speak. Just stared at me like I'd punched her. I looked around, no sign of Dean or Mom. Just her, standing in jeans and a hoodie like she was about to ask for a ride, like she hadn't shown up at every place I'd tried to rebuild my life. How I started. She held up her phone. You used your credit card 2 towns back. I blinked. I paid cash. She showed me the screen, not for the air freshener in the bathroom. You tapped your card. It was true, I remembered now. It was habit, muscle memory. They'd set up alerts. I'm not going back, I said. Her eyes welled up. You don't have to, we want to talk, just talk. Emily, I said, voice flat, you followed me across 4 states. Because you're family. I exhaled through my nose, closed the car door behind me. I know that's the problem. I got in the car. She knocked on the window once, then again. I drove away anyway. She didn't follow. But I didn't look back. I moved across the country to escape my family. They followed me here. I didn't stop until I saw the ocean. It was late afternoon by the time I hit the California coast. The sun was low, smeared across the sky like honey on glass. I pulled over at a viewpoint just past Big Sur, parked my car crooked and stepped out into the wind. There was no cell signal, no buildings in sight, no family van creeping in the rear view. Just the sound of waves slapping the cliffs and wind curling around my ears like a warning and a welcome at the same time. I stood there for almost half an hour. Just breathing. Trying to believe I made it. Caleb's place was north of there, tucked into a sleepy town you wouldn't find unless you were looking for it, somewhere between the pines and the fog, far enough from everything to feel like nowhere. His wife Jenna answered the door when I arrived. She didn't know me, hadn't seen me in 10 years, but she didn't flinch. You're taller than I thought, she said, stepping aside. Shoes off, please, kids are napping. That was it. No interrogation, no awkward questions. Just shoes off, come in. Their guest room had a twin bed, a dresser, and a hand-painted sign above the window that said, "Breathe easy." I almost cried when I saw it. Caleb gave me a job sweeping up his shop, filing invoices, organizing tools. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, honest, the kind of work where no one asked what I was running from. They had chickens in the yard, a hammock between 2 trees, a daughter who wore capes and a son who spoke in full monologues about dinosaurs. I wasn't part of their life exactly, but I was welcome to orbit it. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like someone's backup plan. A few weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. No signs of Dean, no calls, no flyers. It was like the spell had broken. Like distance had finally become what it was supposed to be, safety. I started therapy through a low-income clinic nearby, told the counselor everything. She didn't gasp or take notes like she was documenting a case study. She just nodded, sometimes asked questions that landed like soft punches. Do you think they know they're hurting you? I shrugged. Do you think that matters? That one landed harder. I started writing again, not in a journal this time, not something they could steal or scan or photocopy. Just my own Word doc on a password-protected laptop I kept zipped under the bed. Not letters, not essays. Just pieces of myself I was trying to glue back together. I'd write about the motel room and the diner coffee and the truck stop tears, but I also wrote about things I hadn't let myself remember in years, like the time I won a spelling bee and no one showed up, or the Christmas I spent alone after getting strep and how no one called to check if I needed soup. Little betrayals, tiny wounds that added up. One night I wrote the phrase, "I moved across the country to escape my family." Then I added, "They followed me here." And I stared at it. And stared. And finally, for the first time, I didn't feel crazy. I felt angry. Because that sentence sounded like a horror story. And it was. Only the monster wasn't some shadowy stalker in the woods, it was expectation. It was obligation. It was the assumption that being born into a group meant you owed them your entire self. And when I stopped giving that to them, they came after it. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Postmarked from Indiana. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, one sheet of paper typed, "We've decided to let you go. We're done chasing you. If this is what you really want, silence, you've got it. Mom, Dean, Emily." No greeting, no signature, just that. I read it twice. Then I left. Because it wasn't a surrender. It was a threat disguised as mercy. It was them saying, "You won, but don't feel too good about it." And it didn't matter. Because they were wrong. It was what I wanted. Silence, distance, my life unborrowed, unmanipulated, unshared unless I chose to share it. I burned that letter in Caleb's fire pit. Watched the smoke twist up through the pines like a prayer no one had to answer. And that night when I lay in bed, the wind through the cracked window sounded almost like applause. Now, almost a year later, I've built something. Not big, not flashy, but mine. I rent a small apartment over a cafe. I still work at the shop part-time and teach basic tech literacy classes at the local library. I have a cat named Minnow who wakes me up by sleeping on my face. I have friends who know me by who I am, not who I used to be. I've even started dating someone slowly, gently, no rush. I haven't spoken to my family since that letter. And I don't plan to. Because love, real love, doesn't chase you down the interstate. It doesn't sneak into your life with binders and flyers and forced apologies. It doesn't corner you and call it care. Real love gives you room to choose. And this time I chose myself. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.